Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the closing session of our 2 days Stakeholders event. So can you please take your seats? Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. Buongiorno a tutti. Vorrei cominciare per ringraziare la regione.
I would like to begin by thanking the region of Lombardy and the Italian presidency of the European Union for this conference and for their excellent and warm hospitality. Thank you very much.
Closing session of this conference. And from the side of the European Commission, we are of course naturally very, very pleased with the commitments and the enthusiasm which has been displayed at this conference, but also with the many contributions that we have received in the run-up to the conference. It's actually close to 400 contributions in total, which shows how important and relevant this strategy is. Yesterday we heard strong political statements from the presidents of the regions, from the representatives of the Ministries of Foreign Affairs, and from the European Commissioner responsible for regional policy, Mrs. Crețu. And I would just like to recall some of her statements from yesterday. She said that when it comes to translate the commitments into actions, it's very important to focus. It's very important to focus on the pragmatic, realistic, and measurable common objectives for the macro region. In this way, the macro-regional strategy can actually play an important part in improving attractiveness, competitiveness, and connectivity, and increasing smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. You know, from the Commission side, this is the fourth macro-regional strategy that we are actively working on. The first one was the Baltic strategy, which colleagues have mentioned already, which was launched in 2009. The second one came 2 years later, in 2011, the Danube strategy. And the third one was launched just 2 weeks ago in Brussels, when we had the opportunity to launch the Ionian and the Adriatic strategy, where both Italy and Slovenia are participating. So what can we learn from the strategies and the work that colleagues have done so far? Well, maybe we can offer you a few pieces of advice from the Commission for you to consider. The first one is to learn from the good practice of other colleagues and to closely cooperate with them who have already had some experience during the years. Learn from the mistakes of the other colleagues in the Baltic and the Danube strategy in particular. And if I may say, avoid too much discussion and just get started. Sometimes there has been a bit of too many priorities selected for the different strategies, and that has led to diluting resources, and it has also led to some delays. So if there is one advice that we can give you, that we would like to give you from the Commission, the Commissioner was also mentioning it yesterday, try to be focused. Don't have too many priorities. The second piece of advice is, of course, to align the objectives of the policies with the funds that we have. In the legislative framework for 2014-2020, for the European Investment and Structural Funds, we have now embedded the macro-regional strategies. So member states have a very, very good opportunity to align the national and regional policies and to mobilize the funding and to get results. With regard to the EU funds, it's essential that the operational programs are aligned to serve the thematic priorities of the strategy. And I would just mention the European Investment and Structural Funds, because this is what we mostly speak about. But please try to think also of other sources for financing. There are other European sources of financing. We have programs such as Horizon, COSME, or LIFE. we should also support the implementation of the strategy. We have the European Investment Bank, and we have other international financial institutions, and they should also play a key role in supporting the investments of the macro-regional strategy. And then there are also other types of national and regional financing, which could also support the implementation of the strategy. So if you think of all these different sources of financing, I think that there is enough for you to start with. All the mainstream operational programs of the European Structural Investment Funds can support the strategy for the Alpine region. And they can do that in their own country, but also outside the territory. And this is essential to remember. Please convey this message to all the managing authorities, because this is really important to think about as well. To mainstream cooperation in all the programs, it's a good method for achieving better results and more efficient spending. We should always try to find solutions for more added value. Now, what will be the next steps? Well, from the Commission side, we will take account of all the contributions that has been received during this extensive consultation period, and also the rich discussions from the workshops of today. We will prepare 2 documents, a communication and an action plan, and our time frame is in 6 months' time. We should be ready in June 2015. When the Commission has adopted these documents, we will transmit them to the Council, to the Parliament, to the Committee of the Regions and the European Economic and Social Committee. And after endorsement of the European Council, which we hope will happen next autumn, the implementation work will start. So, thank you very much. This is just what I wanted to say as an introduction. We have now more or less 1 hour to listen to the outcome of the workshops and to move ahead with presentations from the Deputy Director General of the Regional Policy, Norman Poppens, and also to listen to the Italian speakers from the Regional Assembly and from the government of Lombardia. But now I would like to invite to the stage with me the 3 facilitators from the workshops, Jean-Marc Venenot, Marco Onida, and Fritjof Elm. They have all been working very, very hard with our Italian colleagues in order to make the success of this conference. And I would like to start by giving the floor to Jean-Marc. He was the rapporteur, the facilitator for the first workshop, Driving Innovative Growth. So please, Jean-Marc.
Sorry, thank you very much, Lena. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, as Lena said, I was the person facilitating the first workshop corresponding to the first pillar of the future strategy, which is about increasing growth and prosperity in the Alpine region. And to be honest, I was really impressed by a first basic finding, is that there is a clear, broad consensus on what needs to be tackled. Having worked on some other macro-regional strategies in some other parts of Europe, I think it's, for me, the first time that I see all those views expressed during this workshop going into the same direction. And I think this is very promising because it really gives a very solid basis for further work and further cooperation together. So this was a first point. The second one is that it was also expressed clearly that potentials in these regions are high. We are very far from starting from scratch. There is a high potential in innovation already, technological innovation, organizational innovation. There is a lot of potential in terms of economic dynamism. There are existing networks, there are existing clusters, there are strong decision centers, there are strong research centers and so on. So there is already a very solid basis also for work together. But there are also challenges that are clearly identified, such as demographic change, climate change, Of course, the question of language barrier, which is also somehow recurrent in all regions in Europe. And there is also maybe expressed a need for better social innovation. So these are what we got as a first basic diagnosis of what the situation in the region is about. But all those positions and views were expressed in a very dynamic tone and on a very dynamic approach, which could be translated in somehow such as, let's turn our challenges into potentials, and of course, let's also build on our potentials. And for this, there seems to be a rather clear reply, which is the EUSALP. The EUSALP can help pave the way and also change the way of life of the citizens, of the population in the regions. And as said by one of the participants, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, because you already get all the ingredients in this region to get into the direction of changing in the better way the life of your population. To do this, there is a long list of tools, of instruments, of programs, of financing that have been identified. Of course, the EU funds, the COSME, it was already said by Elena. There are financing instruments, there are already networks, European enterprise, European networks, and so on. So the challenge that is in front of us is, of course, to be able to use all those resources in a smart manner. And again, last but not least, to turn the last challenge into a potential. And the last big challenge ahead of us is how to improve cooperation, how to turn from somehow a national-oriented or regional-oriented way of deciding policies and actions to a transnational way of doing it in the Alpine region context. How can we use all those potential resources existing, how to make them more coordinated together through somehow this transnational cooperation, transnational approach that would be supported, of course, by the Alpine strategy. And in fact, this is maybe the only challenge. We have identified the areas, the main topics where we should work together, and I listed them roughly speaking at the very beginning. We are confident about the potentials of this region. The only thing now is, okay, how can we do together to make it on a cooperative way? It's very simple, but at the same time, it's also the big challenge ahead of us. And of course, last but not least, and I think this will be the last point, because we need to be short to allow for discussion, was a proposal made also by one of the speakers. We also need to act very quickly. And one of the deficits that we get in other macro-regional strategies is the lack of visibility. And we need to make it popular. We need to make it visible. We need to make populations in the Alpine region aware of the potential of this Alpine strategy, and how could we do better, make it alive very quickly by, for instance, developing 2 or 3 key projects, key platforms of cooperation that would show the direction, that would pave the way for further cooperation together. And there were, based on example and discussion we had in the workshop, there were some proposals, like, for instance, try to put the regions together that work, I'm sorry for the jargon, that work on smart specialization strategies. Let's try to identify those regions that are sharing the same sectors of activities. Let's put them together. Yeah. Sorry?
We have very little time.
Oh, sorry. So I'm just finishing now. So this is one example. Another example is how to create or to make more visible a platform already existing of researchers and business companies, SMEs together and so on. So there may be already some very key visible projects that will already give the flavor of the future strategy. And these are, all of them, very encouraging ideas that were developed in this workshop. Sorry for being long now.
Thank you very much, Jean-Marc. It is indeed a challenge to keep to the very limited time we have, but we have 2 other workshops as well. So now I'm turning to Marco Nida, who will share with us what happened in the second workshop, Connecting the Regions. Please.
Yes, thank you, Lena. Well, we had a very lively workshop on transport and connectivity, which, let's say, broadly speaking, all in all, confirmed the focus and the priorities which were highlighted by the Commission in its consultation document. However, there were a number of issues that came up quite strongly, and which is very important for us to take into account for the future steps of the process. First of all, there's a clear need to have more focus on the population. It was highlighted that we have to design transport policies not just, of course, for goods transport, but also for the needs of people. But at the same time, mountain environment does not allow for a construction of too many roads. So basically, this results in a greater focus on sustainability, in particular in vulnerable areas. And the second is the more efficient way of using the resources, and a very good example was made of investing a lot in transit infrastructure without taking into account of the logistic that this implies in the big nodes in the metropolis. So if you have a big new infrastructures, rail infrastructure, tunnels, but at the same time you do not focus on the nodes and logistical needs of the metropolises, basically you do not use resources in a sufficiently efficient way. The local needs, I don't see the time actually, so I'll go more or less random. The local needs have to be taken into account. In particular, this came up again during the debate, local railways, which are not always profitable, but they have to be given some focus somehow. Mobility should be considered in a broad sense. It's not just mobility in terms of rail or roads, but also mobility encompassing, for instance, cycling. We had two different interventions, both highlighting the role of cycling mobility in the Alpine region, car sharing, also in terms of soft measures, integrated ticketing, cross-border for schedules, for instance, and for that it's very important all the ITC work which can be done in the macro-regional strategy. Third, the integration between transport and other pillars of EUSALP came up as a very important aspect. There was a kind of fear that we would deal now with infrastructures without taking into account the effects of transport on the other pillars, and that is something that we have to take into account, of course. Fourth aspect that came up is the importance of cross-border investments, not only for transport, but also for soft investments, in particular in ICT, better promotion and better use of the existing resources and existing incentives. An example was made with the vouchers which are made available under EU law for investing at small scale for broadband, and there is quite no knowledge about this possibility in the valleys, and that is to be taken into account. Finally, last but not least, it fits very well also with the first point on the priority on people. The point was made by many that all this investment and services should serve the quality of life. We should have both transport and connectivity, which are not an end in themselves, but they should be aimed at having better services in the Alpine region, in particular in the remote areas, in particular when we talk about health, when we talk about learning. And to that extent, both transport and connectivity should be at the service of people, in particular to bring better service, to reduce the need to transport physically certain goods, and to offer e-services, which are also a better way to sustainability. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marco. I then turn to Fritjof Elm, who will present to us the outcome of the third workshop, Protecting the Environment and Promoting a Sustainable Management of Energy and Natural Culture Resources. Quite a challenge as well, please.
Thank you very much.
Grazie.
As a facilitator, I was in the lucky position to set a bit the scene, how we wanted to achieve this, and we had three objectives I defined. First, to inform the audience, which was very simple and well done by Agnes Kellerman, our expert. Then we wanted to raise the awareness that the whole approach of the macro-regional strategy has a real added value in terms of environment and energy, and as well, of course, to make some steps for the development of the communication and action plan. And of course, one major issue of the whole workshop was to check if our core document, that was the basis for the public consultation, had the correct priorities, or if there were maybe now, after the evaluation of the public consultation some slight changes that might lead, at least in some points, to a different direction in the drafting of the action plan. And I only want to raise 3 points that might have led to a slight modification. The one point is DG Environment, it's very good that we have them both, came up with the topic of soil. Indeed, we might have missed this a bit, but I think it's clear that the Alpine heritage, that this tremendous natural resources are really consisting of the soil and of the minerals. So there might be also the need to include this a bit more than we had envisaged so far. Then we now might have to think a bit more about the needs that climate change is posing to us, because in some areas in the year, the glaciers are really, really relevant for the big rivers that are coming out of the Alps, like, for example, the Po, as we are here in Italy. And maybe we should also have a bit more a view on the whole topic. And as regards to energy, I was impressed that we already have about 700 local municipality projects on energy only in France. And if we are talking about renewable energy projects, it is of course clear that they're only dealing with water, biomass, wind, and so on, and that they are always are of a small size, and that they therefore have to be realized, of course, in the local municipalities. And therefore, I think in terms of energy, we even more have to stress that the whole strategy is this bottom-up approach, and not even only a regional approach, but an approach that needs to go down really to the very bottom and local municipalities. Otherwise, it will be really, really difficult to achieve these energy solutions we want to have. So now we are, I think I leave it as it is. I try to facilitate even this in terms of time. And we are waiting for your questions and answers.
Yes. Thank you very much, Fritjof. Actually, we were a little bit strict with the time here because we wanted to have at least 10 minutes of discussion with you in the audience. And I think that we should go down and to ask you if you have any questions or if you have any particular statements that you would like to make. We have 10, 12 minutes for that before we invite the next speaker on the stage. So please, there are colleagues with microphones prepared to take your questions or comments. So if you could please raise your hand, state who you are, and then be short and concise in your statement. Any questions, please, or comments? Yes, please, please. Please.
The same before, Marco Zanella. Only one question, which is not really related exactly to Mr. M, related with the energy, but energy consumption means also insulation and investment in building construction and so. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I totally, sorry, this is maybe too loud. I totally agree. It's of course also part of the public consultation that one focus should be the whole building sector, to put it simple. And I think this was also an outcome of the public consultation, that we only had so far 3 concrete actions, and the building sector was part of it. And our expert Schaffner from the University of Zurich also said that this is even enough. If we have 3 action areas and we're doing those areas really, really well, this is enough, and the building sector was part of it, indeed, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments or statements or questions? Now it's the time. Yes, please.
I know what he's going to ask.
For you.
Probably.
Sergio Leolon, consigliere della Regione.
Sergio Leolon, councillor from the Veneto region. I would like to bring to the table an issue that was already outlined by Mr. Onida, but I would like to expand on it, if you will. The Alpine macro-regional policy encompasses a huge territory that embeds 70 to 80 million inhabitants. However, I feel that full emphasis should be put on the Alpine territory and on the Alpine populations. None of the three addresses, the last three addresses, focus the fact that the core element of the Alpine geography is that there are a lot of people fleeing the areas, and so we need to combat that. The fact that these territories are losing their inhabitants because unfortunately, deserted mountain areas will collapse on urban areas. If mountain areas are not duly populated, metropolitan areas will grow larger and larger. So I would say that the core objective of any policy should be exactly the one that I've just outlined.
Thank you very much. A comment which was shared by many of you. Marco, please.
Well, I would just like to add, it was the underlying fact behind why we need to do better coordination and better use of resources on transport and e-connectivity. In fact, in the end, when I said we have to focus on quality of life, it was exactly underlying the fact that the underlying fact is that if you do not have sufficient quality of life, people leave the mountain and then you have the depopulation. So I apologize for not having said that, but that was the starting point. We have to keep the remote areas, the mountain areas alive. We have to keep people working there. We have to keep people studying there. We have to keep people, they are not just going on holiday, which is the model city versus mountains. People go to mountains for having a holiday. They have to be able to stay there if they want. And of course, depopulation is the basic why we need to do this better services and better quality of life.
Thank you very much. Another question? Yes, please.
Grazie, Sabrina Sammuri, Regione Lombardia.
Thank you very much, Sabrina Samuni, Region of Lombardy. According to the results of the public consultation, the first objective, the very first one, was indicated as unblocking the creative potential for services and building things that come from natural resources. According to me, this issue of creativity did not come to the fore today during our discussion. While I think it's a very interesting subject to speak about, encouraging development of creative communities could actually solve part of the depopulation issue, and partly it could offer interesting solutions to solve the conflict between a rich and vital economy and a sustainable economy, because creativity brings these two things together. There are many examples in Europe and also in Italy of abandoned areas where places that were totally depopulated have been revived. Think of the city of Matera, which was almost abandoned until a few years ago, and now it has become one of the emblems of a worldwide heritage of mankind. And I think that, therefore, there could be some sort of resources dedicated to this interesting project.
It was part of the discussion we had in the workshop that, in fact, what we're trying to take up from all those opinions is that indeed there might be somehow conflicting interests between what the innovation capacity of some areas as opposed to others could create maybe further gaps. And quite the opposite, the strategy is there to identify what kind of connections, of new connections, we can really set up between those economies that also need to be based on creative approaches. The reason why I was also very briefly referring to the the need to improve social coordination, social innovation, which is also part of the innovation dimension that is somehow, in general, not ignored but set aside as opposed to the technological or organizational innovation. And this is all in all what we need to take into account to find the right balance between those activities that could really develop creative activities, creative industries, creative approaches in a more comprehensive, somehow innovation type of mindset, and which also could make the link between somehow remote areas, mountain areas, with the more urban areas that are more used to develop this type of technological or organizational innovation. So this is also a type of bridge that the strategy should be able to create somehow.
Thank you very much. One last question before we continue with our program. Yes, please.
For you.
Grazie. Paolo Angelini, Ministero dell'Ambiente, attuale Presidente del Comitato Permanente della Convenzione delle Alpi. Abbiamo lavorato come convenzione.
Paolo Angelini for the Ministry for the Environment and currently working at the EUSALP project. We have always been for EUSALP from the very beginning. According to me, what should really call our attention is that this new instrument, which is called EUSALP, is extremely important to encourage cooperation between the inhabitants of the mountains, of the plains, and of the cities. This is the new type of relationship that we want from this Convention for the Alps. We believe that people who live in the Alps should not live in a lonely, isolated situation vis-à-vis people who live in the plains or in the cities, because only by having this kind of balanced situation, and if there is this attractiveness, only by doing this can we be able to take care of these territories, which are fundamental for people who live downstream in the plains or in the cities. So there should be a kind of a trading off of services between people who live in these three environments. Unfortunately, examples we have tell us that things are not working in this way. In Italy, for example, there are 500,000 people living above 800 meters of altitude, and these people have a very, very low access to the World Wide Web and through ADSL and not through the broadband. So how can we imagine that in a globalized world, people who live in the mountains must also make the choice of being hermits? This is not at all appealing and cannot be the appeal. We have the mayor of Ostana here, who was recently very happy to announce that in his village there was a reversal of trend. 3 children were born. And that is very exciting for a village at 1,200 meters. But then you really wonder how these children will grow up. What kind of education will they have? So the political issue is that only when we can offer equal opportunities to people who live in the mountains will we be able to enjoy the systemic products of the mountains. A Bavarian study some years ago highlighted the fact that the territory around the Alpine Arc is the most industrialized and has the highest innovative capacity, the highest population density, and the highest GDP in Europe. And this is connected to the fact that an ecosystem like water, and therefore the power that came from the water, allowed the people who live downstream of the Alps to develop the system. And that was very important. Now, if these services can still be guaranteed to people who live in the Alps, and this added value can be acknowledged, well then, and only then, will we be sure that we can develop in a Europe that is more united than what it appears to be today.
Thank you very much for this statement, which I think more was presenting a vision on how it should really be to live in the Alpine region. If there is another question, let's take it. I don't want to hinder anyone who wants to say something more or to make a statement or a question to us. Is there? Yes, please. Yes.
I would like only to answer to one problem you mentioned about 1,000 meters in the mountains.
Excuse me, can you please introduce yourself so everybody knows?
My name is Robert Henkel. I'm working for DG Connect and responsible broadband policy. One problem you mentioned was the digital divide or the lack of broadband connection in the mountains area. The solution I presented in the session 2 is satellite broadband. The infrastructure is built up. You can order it immediately. Go on Broadband for All website. You find in the providers of your regions in your country many providers, normally not only one per country, and they can bring your broadband in the mountains tomorrow. And if you need money to support the people to buy the satellite shell and the modems, around €400 at the beginning, then you can use a voucher scheme, which was also mentioned by my colleagues. There's a voucher scheme, and for this you can also use the state aids of the structure funds. And so this problem is more or less solved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So every one of you who have the slightest problem with broadband, we have from the Commission here, European Commission, colleagues from DG Connect, so you can please address yourself to him. Now I would like to continue with our closing session today. I ask my 3 colleagues very, very much. Thank you very, very much for your contribution today. Thank you. And then it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Noormans Poppens, who is the Deputy Director General of DG Regional Policy, for his closing speech. If you want to.
Thank you. Thank you, Lena. And I have this great honorable duty to close this event, which also has a downside because anything I say probably has been said already before. So I try to be very short, and I see that my colleagues have worked with you very hard these 2 days, and I see that this is a great input into our common work to establish the EU strategy for the Alpine region. I'm really sorry that I missed yesterday's discussions, but I can tell you why, because as you know, at this moment in time, we are trying to finalize many programs for jobs and growth. And yesterday, in fact, we managed to launch almost 50 inter-service consultations for the adoption of our investment programs in our member states and regions. So this is very ambitious. And as you know, our target actually is to adopt almost 2/3 of our ERDF, Cohesion Fund and Multi-Fund programs for the 2014-20 by the end of this year or early next year. This is very important, I think, for all of us, because obviously these programs will provide investment for next 7 years in all EU member states and regions. And although we are, of course, working very fast now, the quality will still matter more, and we will not sacrifice quality over speed. So, in fact, these adoptions are possible only because of the great cooperation between the Commission, the Member States, regions, and all stakeholders involved. But now I have to come back to the Alpine strategy, and this is, as been said by my colleagues, the 4th macro-regional strategy that will be established, hopefully then in 2015. But still a lot of work needs to be done. And I think my colleagues already delivered the messages from the Commission. It's very important to have a commitment, political commitment, but of course everyone who is part of a strategy, be it at different levels of governance, different stakeholders should work together, and I think the Alpine region is very well placed for that because the cooperation already exists in this region, and hopefully then this cooperation will lead to very concrete and material results. It's very important to prioritize, and I see that also for the, as has been said, the mistake of some strategies before was that they were trying to cover everything, and they were trying to deal with everything, but that wasn't, of course, very, very efficient. So I'm happy to see that the Alpine strategy will focus on priority areas, that it will be dealing with environmental technology, with local logistics, innovation, and of course it's very, very good that this prioritization is then later on also implemented. But we will try to work together with you to ensure that. It is extremely important to have very clear results defined and very clear objectives. This is something we are now also trying to do with our big programs, because, as you know, this new intervention logic for the EU structural investment funds is really something that we are very transfixed on, and we are working together with everyone to ensure that it is there in the programs, that you see the real needs, then you see how they will be addressed and what results will be achieved. So, for example, in our programs, we are really working on the right use of different indicators for outputs and results. And I think also for strategies, it's very, very important to have these results defined and also objectives against which we can measure the success. Again, we have been working with already established strategies in order to streamline that. It is work in progress, but I think we have some good examples, and I hope we can also help the Alpine strategy to be on the same quality level. Now, I hope my commissioner said what was written in her speech, because actually when we established the first strategy, the Baltic Sea strategy, years ago, we attached to this concept of macro-regional strategies 3 no's, and that was like necessary in order to proceed with adoption, so no new funding, no new legislation, etc., etc. I'm going to be brave enough to say that I think it's time to turn the 3 no's into 3 yes. I hope my commissioner said it, so I'm more legitimate by repeating it, because in fact these 3 yes could be much more valuable than 3 no's. So yes to better aligned legislation, yes to simplified process, and yes to better alignment of available funding. Now, as my colleagues said, of course, our mainstream programs, our ETC programs, transnational, cross-border, they all should also take into account the objectives which are in macro-regional strategies when they design the right measures. But I think it's not just about our programs supporting the strategies. In fact, the value added of strategies is also the other way around. Because if you have a macro-regional strategy, it actually can help the concrete regions and member states to ensure that the investment that comes also from structural funds, but not only from us, is actually more efficient, better coordinated, and that it has better results. Because I think macro-regional strategies provide really, really good basis for cooperation. It provides a very good basis for exchanging best examples, for benchmarking against each other, and also really designing the right measures. Particularly, of course, if you look at the field of environment and transport, it's obvious that these connections are so needed, and everybody is linked together, that by working individually, nobody will ever achieve any targets in these fields. But as we heard also from Jean-Marc and others today, also in the field of innovation, we are working hard to establish smart specialization strategies in all EU member states and regions. And these strategies will be a serious basis for proceeding with investment in the field of innovation and research and development. And there, of course, again, comparison, exchanging best examples, benchmarking against each other, looking at the regions who are very well performing in the field of innovation and trying to help those who are not well performing to catch up. For these type of issues, the macro-region strategies are extremely well placed to deliver and to have actually very high value added. We've seen the Danube strategy being very active on smart specialization strategies in this region, and I also wish and I really suggest that the Alpine strategy focuses on this exchange of practices for the concrete strategies and measures that are very, very important for everyone in this macro region. Just a few words. I hear that, and I know that in this particular region, of course, this link between urban and rural areas or mountainous areas is extremely important. And of course, it's true that in the funds we tend to focus on urban areas because these are the centers of growth in Europe. But I think the new thinking puts really clearly forward this concept of rural-urban partnerships. It's called Rurban, if I'm not mistaken, and we've been having a lot of events already in member states in trying to turn this controversy between urban and rural areas into actually a win-win situation. Because nobody can survive alone. Cities need mountainous and rural areas, and vice versa. Rural areas will never survive without prosperous cities. And this is why we believe that this is really can become a win-win situation. And again, strategies such as Alpine strategy can play a very crucial role in showing that this is possible. So I think I've spoken enough because you all have, planes and trains to catch. I hope there is no strike, because last time I was meeting on Alpine strategy, it was close to Lyon and there was a strike of trains, and I could not get back home. But I hope today is not the case. So I hope that you had very, very good days. Lena already explained what will happen next. There will be concrete steps. Our cooperation doesn't stop. It will continue even more vigorously after this conference because we see that there is a great commitment to this strategy, and that's when I said that will allow us to actually adopt this strategy in 2015. And as officially closing, I would like to express really our gratitude and thanks to the region of Lombardy, to the Italian presidency of the European Council, and of course to the EUSALP program. And thank you for everyone who participated in this very important event. And I am absolutely confident that the inputs from these discussions will materialize into very concrete first documents on paper or electronically, but then into concrete actions in this macro region. And that will actually bring us to more prosperity, growth, and jobs. So thank you again so much for listening to me, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much, Norman. This was actually the last word from the Commission today. Now it's my pleasure to invite on the stage Mr. Rafael Cattaneo, who is the President of the Regional Assembly in Lombardy, for his closing speech.
Thank you very much, Lena. It's a great pleasure for me to take the floor at the end of this stakeholder conference. 2 days of a really great job. And first of all, please let me call an applause for President Roberto Maroni and all the regional government staff which organized it in a so outstanding way these 2 days of the stakeholder conference. Well, for 2 days we have seen one the other. We have seen in this so nice structure the speakers, but I think now at the end of the job we have to see up. Please look at the roof and see the sky. You can see the skyscraper of Palazzo Lombardia, which like a finger indicate us the sky. Well, my question is, what is the sky of our EUSALP strategy? What is the political perspective? What we are looking for? Let me switch in Italian to give just a few remarks about our political perspective.
Well, the first remark that I would share with you is this. At times, life is really generous and makes it possible for us to see our dreams come true. And I would like to give you like a biographical quote. In 1978, I was awarded a scholarship by the Milan's Chamber of Commerce, and I got to work with Mr. Piero Valsecchi, who was the chair of the Milan Chamber of Commerce back then. He gave me two thick books that were fresh from ink, published by Yaka Book, a Milan publisher. And the book summarized the minutes of a congress which took place in Lugano a few years back, the Alps for Europe, a political proposal. This dates back to 1978. And please allow me to read out a few lines from the preface, Mr. Feliciano Benvenuti, who was opening that conference, and we recalled him yesterday with my colleagues. So, and here I quote him. Feliciano Benvenuti said, perhaps the dawn of a new era is coming up, where the profiling of juridical entities are perhaps tapering off, where personality-less type of states may become states founded on personal relationships, that is to say, subjective relationships. Suffice it to think about the Alps resistance or the Adrian Alps resistance to realize the fact that these are not simply the premises of a revival of all the elements that push us to recognize the essence of common ideals, of common beliefs of peoples that, despite the fact that they are divided by boundaries, live and populate the Alps and feel the need of getting together in order to share common beliefs and common experiences, and also the same experience related to this transnational essence. This dates back to 1988. If we really believe that national states may coexist with the so-called individualized states, and if we may interpret such reality as a prelude to tomorrow's reality, we may become aware of the fact that today's efforts, this getting together of peoples will not be confined to a single geography, but rather will become the spirit of our future reality. So perhaps this very thought was, so to speak, faded in the background a bit of the minutes. And he concluded by saying that for the Alps, it is possible to imagine the existence of an entity that transcends states and boundaries, though a reality that is cherishing regional traditions, a model that is typical of Europe, of a united Europe, a community that doesn't want to be entrenched by territorial boundaries, but rather by a community of needs. And I'm not simply hinting to economic and financial needs, but rather by common beliefs, traditions and customs. This is a very long quote, but it really sets the course about our way forward. It hints to the importance of generating a common identity that really transcends national boundaries. And this is the perspective, this is the outlook that our strategy wants to embrace. Second up, Europe nowadays is suffering, and again, I'd like to use a shorter quote by Pope Francesco, and he gave this address in Strasbourg last week. Over the last few years, alongside the enlargement of the European Union, we've seen a growing mistrust from the citizens' end towards institutions that are very aloof, that are simply focusing on setting rules that are perceived to escape the beliefs of peoples. And this quote by the Pope is extremely true. In Italy, 5 years ago, 2 in 3 Italians were seeing in the European Union a source of hope for the future. Now the percentage is totally toppled. 2 in 3 are very critical, and just 1 in 3 believes that Europe still is a future hope. And then the Pope continued by saying, and from different ends we really perceive a progressive aging, tiredness, of an old-fashioned Europe that is no longer fertile, that is no longer jolly. So the greatest ideals have faded in the background in favor of technocrats and bureaucracy. And yes, this is an old-fashioned Europe. And so where can we revive? And how can we revive Europe if not in local communities, if not in the multitude of territories that make it up? We have to draw from the strength of European peripheries. And I'd like to go back to the European Constitution, because this is the real essence of the Alpine strategy. These territories want to get center stage in order to revive the ideals of Europe, and this is the task of the regions. It's an historical task that is given to communities. We will succeed in recreating the euros of the people if we succeed in reviving the essence of our regional imprinting, and I think that this is the deeply rooted essence of the strategy. Having said that, I think that regional parliaments will take on an increasingly important role. Today, 2014, 100 years ago, and I'm not saying 1,000 years ago, but 100 years ago, Europe was setting off to embark itself into a dramatic battle, and people were dying by the millions, and the Alps were at the forefront of this war. So 100 years later, we have to remind ourselves that there are alternatives to rifles and machine guns, and this weapon is the power of language, words, and the ability to listen to regions, different communities, and this is the responsibility of parliaments. That is why we're here, because we want to dialogue, we want to communicate, and we want to get a better understanding of each other's realities. And I'm on my way to conclude, and I just want to point out a few things about the essence of the last 2 days and the Alpine strategy. Well, a positive remark that I would like to share with you. We definitely set the foundations at the very basis of this strategy, and these pillars are the right ones. In fact, the macro-regional strategy will have to revolve around 3 keywords: competitiveness, access, sustainability. These are the 3 buzzwords that really represent the cornerstone of our strategy. Having said that, though, we really have to set priorities, a few priorities, very hands-on ones. And which priorities are we looking at? Let me list out 5 of them, and they really cut across here. Someone really applauded to the need of combating the fact that locals are fleeing these areas. Someone talked about the importance of unlocking the creative potential. How can we do that? Well, in 5 different ways. Number 1, we have to foster labour and job opportunities in the Alps, especially for small and medium enterprises. We have to give them tools and opportunities to give them professional opportunities there. We have to use European funds together in a very cohesive fashion, not in a fragmented way, but in a joint fashion. We have to bridge the divide. And we talked about the importance of new technologies, such as, for example, broadband in the Alpine territory. I really believe that this is the most concrete response to the issues emphasized in this domain. Number 4, we need to manage environmental resources at a higher level. So we have to really put on the macro-regional hat. And thinking about my Swiss colleagues, we really have to try and fix the issues related to cross-border employment and labour, because this represents a fruitful opportunity across borders. So I believe that these are 5 very concrete contributions. However, and I'm on my way to conclude, I would like to emphasise a few challenges that lie ahead. Number 1, we need the support of the European Commission, and I am addressing the DG Regio and the Commissioner. We don't want the European Commission to interpret this strategy as a top-down strategy, but rather as a bottom-up strategy. This is our hope, a strategy that comes from the territory, that is built with it, rather than favouring a top-down approach. In order to do that, we need the European Commission to be aboard and to give the right value to diversity. At times I am concerned about the fact that the European Commission wants to create a sort of a cookie-cutter average European citizen, and I hope we will never get there. The average European citizen that really eliminates diversity. I hope that Europe still remains like a composition of diversities where each and every one is really competent in different types of expertises. There is no magic flute here. In fact, the flute player had really an ominous fate. Number two, we really have to fix the issue related to coordinating this strategy. And I would like to share the standpoint of our Austrian colleagues, and this will be debated tomorrow on the occasion of the regional committee meeting, as a result of some of the proposals made by myself and by my colleague Solage. I don't think that this strategy can survive with just one representative. Rather, I think that this calls for a joint effort, and I believe that there must be a committee that really showcases differences. Delegating this task to just one project coordinator could be a mistake. And lastly, one last point for you. We really need to be role models, and I think that this strategy will win if we succeed in deploying examples, excellent examples, really. We certainly don't need the top-down approach by the Commission, and we don't even need a top-down approach from regions and municipalities. We want to work with stakeholders because they do represent institutions, society, the academia, and they are here because they certainly have a very important share of voice. I am very confident about the fact that this is a platform for a strategy that can set the course for the Europe as a whole, future-wise. Thanks very much indeed, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Mr. Ugo Parolo from the Lombardy region government.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Hello, everyone. I would like to begin by thanking everyone. I'm not being at all formal. These are true, substantial greetings to the citizens, to the stakeholders who have made this final conference very much alive. There are many of us here in Milan to witness this extraordinary event, to witness a time of true participation of the citizens side by side with the institutions at the constitution of the macro alpine strategy. I would also like to thank the experts who have been have had a front role in this morning's sessions and have collected all of the inputs and the remarks that were made. Many remarks were actually made, and they will be very helpful in writing the strategy of the Alpine macro region. And now is when the real work will start. We will treasure the contributions that we have received these days. I would like to thank the DG Regio institutions, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. I would like to thank Regione Lombardia and all the organizers who worked for the excellent outcome of this conference. This is a very meaningful step in the implementation of the EUSALP idea. It will be up to others to draw the conclusions of what has been heard here yesterday and today, one pillar at a time, and bring everything together in the macro-regional strategy. We would like to underscore that there has been a lot of commitment and a lot of liveliness among all these stakeholders that have come from the whole of Italy and the whole of Europe with the idea of cooperation between the various peoples of Europe. We have had a concrete image of something that is being built from the bottom up. The citizens have tried to pull down the barriers that have always tried to separate politics from the citizens of Europe. We have proved that the Alpine regions actually are the heart of Europe, a unique space, a homogeneous territory because of its values and traditions and sense of belonging, and that it is within everybody's interests to cut down the distances between the various areas and especially reduce the distance between the impetuous waters of the urban areas and the much calmer waters of the mountain rivers. There have been concerns, of course, that were brought to the fore here, not only by the inhabitants of the mountains, but also scholars and people who love the mountains, people who believe that, thought that this strategy, which will be extended to 70 million inhabitants, that this strategy will not do the interests of the mountain. Allow me to say, as an elected member of the regional government from the province of Sondrio, which is the only mountain region of our mountain city of our region. Since the very beginning, we had a mandate that was given to us by our citizens, and that the strategy had as an added value the mutual advantage between the mountain areas and the areas downstream in the plains, or as we decided to call them, the areas surrounding the Alps. It is not up to me to draw conclusions, but please allow me to add one more remark, which brings together many concerns that have been expressed. The challenge that is to be won is that of providing a suitable level of representation to the alpine areas, to the truly mountain areas. This means not simply ensuring that the institutions are present there, but it means especially providing specific self-government systems and ways to enhance the resources of the Alps and their territories. First and foremost, water. Water characterizes our mountains, the Alps. Providing self-government means, as has already been said at the European Commission, at the European Parliament, that sometimes you have to take a step back. You cannot expect with a single law to govern all the peoples that live the Alps. The challenge, which is to be won, as I was saying, is to find a satisfactory balance for the development of our region. And we can do that only by ideally building a bridge that will network the energy and strength of the mountains with the innovative strength of the urban areas. This mutual advantage is something that we should always bear in mind. It should be like a polar star to us, because only by doing this will EUSALP, as President Maroni said, become a laboratory for research and processing for the development of Europe, something that will help us bring the whole of Europe to grow, and not only the 7 countries or 48 regions of the macro-regional strategy. The commitment that I feel that I can undertake on behalf of Regione Lombardia and of the Italian state, considering that we coordinate the Italian regions and that we will bring within the steering committee, is that we want to be inclusive and involve, insofar as possible, all the associations of citizens, all the shared interests and the local interests at all levels, and also to keep a balance between the various interests of the territories that are involved. This is the method that we use to organize this final stakeholders conference. The total involvement of citizens, not only of institutions. With these 2 method objectives in mind, I think that we can achieve an agreement with the governments and the countries involved and reach the objectives at the macro-regional level that will make the citizens understand that this is the right dimension to make people understand the enormous problems we have before us: pollution, economic recovery, the depopulation of the mountains, and so on, and that no regional or state institution can tackle alone. In ending, please allow me to say that these 2 days, with the extraordinary and passionate participation of so many regions, siding up with the states and the citizens, we have laid the groundwork so that the macro-alpine strategy will really become a workshop for the Europe of peoples, which was so much wanted and is shared by all. We have worked for the future of our peoples.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parolo. And then I have the pleasure to announce the very last speaker today. I understand President Maroni would like to say a few words. Yes, please.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you all. I was very impressed by the work that has been done here in these last couple of days. Regione Lombardia worked very hard to organize this event with the European Commission, whom I thank for the support it offered. I would like to thank the Italian government and the stakeholders. I was really impressed by the contents of what was said, the speeches that were made, but especially by the passion of all those who offered us their contribution. And this confirms to me that this is the right way to go along. It tells me that today these regions have grown up at the international level, that they have decided that they wish to play their role at the European level and have a direct relationship with the European institutions. We want to become forefront players, we regions of the Alpine macro region, of what may be considered as the new Europe today, the Europe of regions, the Europe of peoples, a Europe that works more and better than how it has worked so far and is perceived by the citizens. We have this extraordinary, important role. And after sitting here these 2 days, I am convinced that we can make it. We have this great responsibility, and I was extremely glad that Commissioner Crețu was able to be here yesterday. I was able to exchange some opinions, some comments with her, and she seemed to have a lot of energy, a lot of positivity. She sees the regions, these regions, and she saw this initiative as a true interlocutor. That is to say that there is no need to go through other institutions, other foreign ministries, and so on, but that there can be a direct relationship, and that she wants to have a direct relationship with us. It's up to us now to make the most of the initiatives that have come to the fore so that we will be able to create a single macro region and not a large number of components that are divided from one another by their language, their borders, by the fact that they're north or south of the Alps. It depends only on us. If we make it, well then, we will really have contributed to changing the institutions and to making our institutions and Europe more modern. I would like to close by re-declaring the commitment of Regione Lombardia, not only as the coordinator of the Italian regions, but I would like to declare our commitment on all the fronts of this project. As early as tomorrow, we will draw the positive conclusions of this event, so that for the first time there will be born a macro region with a capital M, which can be the interlocutor of the European institutions for the advantage of our citizens. I would like to end by thanking the European Commission, the government, the other presidents of regions who are here, and the staff of Regione Lombardia for their extraordinary commitment. This structure was put up in 3 days. We could have used the auditoriums. We could have used other large halls here in Milan, because we do have them, but we wanted to have this meeting here in the heart of our building. We wanted to make everybody feel that the region is here with you, and that this is an initiative in which Regione Lombardia has invested a lot. Thank you to the staff of Regione Lombardia. Thank you to Piero Bassetti for what he did, for his personal story, for his intuition and the support that he has always given this project, and for what he will do from now on. You cannot resign, dear Pietro, because the macro regione of the Alps still needs you.
Dear colleagues, then it's time for me to officially close the 2 days of the Stakeholders event. I wish you all the best for lots of success for the regional strategy of the Alpine region. I would like to thank also everyone who has been involved in these 2 discussions today, in particular in the preparation. I would like to thank the audience and all the stakeholders, the speakers,